Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming. I'm going to begin sharing with PowerPoint. Um, it's normally not a really desired way to teach or do anything. PowerPoint is not exactly a desired tool, but I think given the constraints that we have in terms of time and much else, and the topic's scope, I think PowerPoint, we will use it minimally. We will talk and converse a lot, but we will try and see how much we can gain by using this PowerPoint. Can you all see the PowerPoint first slide? It's weaponizing geography. That's the topic. I
Yes,
am not. Yeah, can you all see?
yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I must make it clear that it's quite embarrassing to call this a master class. I mean, from my perspective, I'm no master of anything. But let it be a conversation. I am curious about what's going on across the world and what has happened in the world. So I'm trying to link what happened in history with what is going on at present and with the role that geography plays in shaping events in the past as well as shaping events now. So that's broadly the scope. And so, therefore, the title chosen was Weaponizing Geography, how oceans and mountains and rivers and plains and valleys and passes and climate have shaped the destinies of nations much more than what ideologies and leaders and powerful politicians have done. This is what we get to hear about is whether a politician said this or whether a particular ideology supports a move or this or that, but we don't get to hear much about how a geographical feature actually has played a role in decisions. Now, what is this weaponizing all about? Um, what is weaponizing? Well, we let us define it very broadly as converting a very ordinary object, which is otherwise um, not a significant one in terms of decision making. In this case, geographical feature or some geographical element as a tool. It could be a technological element. It could be something else. It could be a mineral unearthed from mines. It could be something else. But we are looking at geography today, and how does that help in shaping events? I think I need to. Um,
We can see it fine, Sriram.
okay. Yeah. All right. Now we will take up a few topics and see what weaponizing in geography means through that lens, right? Okay, now we all know, almost all of us know. I don't think anybody here would be unaware of how Russia has been fighting a war with Ukraine for the last 4 or 5 years or 4 years or so. And even earlier, they had quietly taken over a part of Ukraine called Crimea. Why is Russia so hell bent on subduing Ukraine, which it has not been able to do in a very easy way? Ukraine has put up a very strong counter offensive and is defending itself with help from NATO allies and others. But why is Russia so keen? There are several factors. For example, Russia has always been invaded from the West. So Russia has never been, I mean, 500, 600 years ago, Mongols invaded Russia, but that's a different story. For the last 200 years or so, Russia has seen invasions from the West. It needs buffer states to protect itself from the Western power coming and invading Russia. So, why is Russia so keen on Ukraine while it already has NATO members as allies? For example, Poland or Lithuania, Latvia, Finland are all members of NATO. why is Russia so keen on Ukraine not becoming a NATO member and remaining because that in some sense goes back to Russia considering Ukraine as a part of the larger Soviet Union Russian bloc. Ukraine was part of the Russian bloc, whereas other countries were not. It was part of Russia itself. And there is a substantial Russian speaking population in Ukraine. But besides all these factors, there is one reason because now Russia is a very sad country in a way. It's a tragedy for Russia. Russia has the fourth longest coastline in the world, 38,000 kilometers, which is after Canada, Norway, Indonesia comes Russia. Now, it's a very long coastline. They should have a powerful navy. They don't. Now, why? Because much of this coastline actually opens to the Arctic Ocean. Most of Russia's coastline is on the Arctic coast. Just about 5%, just imagine, just 5% of Russia's coastline is ice-free through the year. Okay. That is quite a tragedy for Russia because for such a long coastline, they should have at least 40%, 30%. Some decent percentage of coastline should be ice-free so that they could actually build naval bases. It is also the largest country in the world. So they should have many naval bases spread across their territory, but they don't. What does this mean? This means that they need warm sea ports. Now, warm sea ports are available only in the southern part. There is one warm sea port, sort of slightly disputable warm sea port called Murmansk facing the Arctic Ocean. But that is about it because it is surrounded by ice anyway. So Murmansk being a warm port doesn't really help much because it is surrounded by ice and it doesn't really open up to possibilities. Whereas Sevastopol, which is in Ukraine, is a warm seaport, ice-free through the year. And there are a couple of other Russian ports as well. Now, Russia needs such ports. So Russia has actually quietly occupied Crimea without Ukraine considers Crimea to be part of Ukraine. Russia has already occupied it, so it is a disputed territory. If you get a map from Ukraine, Ukraine will depict Crimea as a part of Ukraine, but Russia is the de facto owner of that place, and it has occupied Sevastopol. Now, this is what Russia has done, and also Russia had a naval base in Syria, which is far away from Russia, but this is Sevastopol. Okay, Syria is below Turkey, somewhere here. It's not in the map here. Now Sevastopol is here. Russia has occupied this small island. It's actually a peninsula. It's linked by land. This is called Crimea. Russia has occupied it. Ukraine has not given up the claim, but Sevastopol is now in Russian hands. Russia has also occupied a port called Tartus in Syria, but they supported the regime of Bashar Assad, and Bashar Assad's regime collapsed and he fled to Moscow. So they had to close the naval base in Tartus. So this is now the only hope for Russia to have an ice-free, round-the-year naval base. Now, this is not all, because this Black Sea, even though they have actually gained the warm sea port, Black Sea opens to, as you can see, there is this place, Istanbul, which is Turkey, and this is called a Bosphorus Strait of Bosphorus, and there is another strait here called the Strait of Dardanelles. Now, both are in the hands of Turkey. Turkey is a NATO member. So even if Russia has gained, even though they have gained the access to Sevastopol, they own the place now. The access to Black Sea is controlled by Turkey. We will see about that in a minute. Now, there is something called Montreux Convention, which was agreed upon in 1936, that was before the Second World War, that gave the right of controlling these two straits, this one and this one, these two, you can see, to Turkey. So Turkey controls access. Turkey is a friend of US. Turkey is a NATO ally. So Russia is in some sense hemmed in. Even though they have access to Sevastopol, they are hemmed in. Now, Montreux Convention, by law, by its mandate, gives Turkey the right to allow military ships. So the moment Russia invaded Ukraine, Turkey said that, sorry, your warships cannot pass through this. So Russia is, I mean, it is not just hemmed in geographically, it has been prevented uh, from moving warships from one place to the other through Black Sea, because this Strait of Bosphorus and Istanbul come in the way, and Turkey has the right over these two very narrow straits, right? So what was Russia's hope? Russia's hope was this port in Syria called Tartus. They've lost control of that also. So that is also gone. There is a problem here in the sense that Russia really has no warm sea port and cannot have great naval power, cannot be a great naval power with access only to the Black Sea. Now, we will see in a minute why naval power has become increasingly important now. Okay. Now, let us look at the other kind of country. Now, after very similar to Russia is Canada. Canada is a very large country, second largest country in the world. Canada's coastline is nearly 7 times longer than Russia's. There are very few ice-free ports. Vancouver on the British Columbian side is one of them. There are very small ports on the eastern side of Canada, but not Halifax and a few others, but nothing much to talk about, not in the grand scale of major ports of the world. But Canada is not aggressively seeking warm ports. Unlike Russia, which is desperate to get warm ports, somehow or the other, even by invading another country, Canada is very cool about it. Canada has one, for second largest country in the world, there are very few warm water ports. Now, why do you think that is so? Why is Canada not really aggressively seeking any warm? Why is the need of Russia not reflected in Canada's policy, or whatever Canada wants? Canada
Feel
is
free
very
to
cool
raise
about it.
hands and I will call on you.
Anyone?
Yeah, Prisha?
Possibly because Russia is confined to the Black Sea, whereas Canada, with limited ports, is not at the mercy of any other country when it comes to trading.
Yeah, you mentioned trading. That is really one critical factor. For Canada, 70% of the trade happens with the United States, and that is actually the land border. So, unlike Russia, the trade happens essentially through US, and that is one. So you don't really need great ports in order to trade for your economy. That's number one. And the other second point is that US is Canada's neighbor. So US in some sense has an interest in protecting the Atlantic and the Pacific coast for its own benefit or its own security. So in some sense, it protects Canada also. So Canada doesn't really care. US is not an enemy, even though we are not very sure about that. But Canada doesn't have much of. Canada has never been invaded since 1812 or something. When US invaded, Canada has been a British territory, has remained a dominion. But there was a war between Canada, US and the Great Britain that time, and Canada saw a little bit of action. That was all. Otherwise, they keep sending troops in the Second World War, First World War, and all. But that is about Canada's army or involvement in any armed conflict. In contrast, Russia has seen invasions continuously through decades, through centuries. So Russia's need for access to warm water port is much more critical, as they think. Canada is quite cool about it. Doesn't matter if Vancouver serves this purpose. That's all right. Okay. Second question is, Canada is at the same latitude of Western Europe, but Canada's ports are icy ports. You need icebreakers to get in. Why is that so? At least at the same latitude, they should forget the security part, but at the same latitude, you should have you should have the similar kind of a weather condition or a climatic condition like Europe, right? But Europe's ports are not ice covered. Canada's ports are ice covered. Why do you think so?
Laya has raised their hand.
Yeah.
So sir, I was thinking it was because of the surrounding location, like next to Canada also probably it's kind of icy, and it's a little maybe the Arctic Circle, like the Arctic landmass, it's probably stretching like something like an oval shape. So the longer part is probably somewhere near Canada, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Possible. I'm not exactly an expert on the climate part of things, but that is possible. But one prominent reason given by experts is that there is something called Gulf Stream. Gulf Stream is actually sea water flowing. It is actually a river on the sea, right? It is a
Oh,
river on the ocean. So, and it is very, very big. Gulf Stream in Atlantic is bigger than all the world's rivers put together. All the world's rivers, including Amazon and
yeah.
Nile and everything else, Niger, Congo, everything else. All the
Hmm.
rivers, the flow of all the rivers put together is not equal to the Gulf Stream's flow. That it is such a powerful stream, and that is a warm water current. Starts from
Hmm.
somewhere around Mexico, goes through Atlantic, and near Canada, it takes a turn to Europe. And
Okay.
at this point,
Also,
near here, there is something
Sriram,
called
also what happens towards the northern coast of Canada, you see the Labrador Sea is there
correct.
in the
Yeah.
map.
So
Yes.
Labrador current comes in here, and Labrador current almost embraces the Canada's coast here. This point which
Oh,
stretches out, and that is closer to the Canada's coast. And Gulf Stream takes a deviation here and moves on to the European side and becomes the North Atlantic drift or whatever they call it. Therefore,
It is
here
the
you
North
have
Atlantic.
so that means it's kind of warmer.
Actually, what happens is
yeah,
the Labrador current and the Gulf Stream current actually meet off the coast of Newfoundland around that area. And in
right,
fact, cause a lot of sea mist, makes it
right,
very difficult.
right, right. So Gulf
Sorry.
Stream moving away from Canada also is responsible for keeping Murmansk as a warm water port, so it is ice free through the year. So that is one reason. There may be other reasons. Akilaka knows better on this. But remember, I mean, we don't talk much about, we talk a lot about rivers, but Gulf Stream is as big as, I mean, not as big as, it is bigger than all the rivers in the world put together in terms of flow. So it is that big. I'm somehow not very happy that we don't teach much about the currents, the ocean currents to children much. We don't see much about ocean currents in our textbooks. We talk a lot about rivers. Okay, now that is the Russia part. Russia is hemmed in, has only that small Black Sea axis. Russia also has access to Caspian Sea, but Caspian Sea is actually an inland lake. There is no, you don't go anywhere beyond the shores of Caspian Sea, so it doesn't provide much access to the outside world. Now, Black Sea opens to Mediterranean Sea through two Turkish ports, I mean Turkish straits, Bosphorus and Dardanelles. And at the other end of Black Sea, other end of Mediterranean, is also a choking point, Gibraltar. So if Britain and Spain decide to choke Gibraltar and not allow Russian warships to pass through, and if Turkey has already decided not to allow Russian warships to pass through because of a certain treaty, you have a very weak position for Russia. You understand? So there is a certain kind of helplessness in Russia, foisted on by the geographical kind of feature it has. Now let's look at how it plays closer home about China and India. We have China right above us on the other side of Himalayas. It controls three big rivers. It controls Brahmaputra, the headwaters of Brahmaputra, Sutlej, and Indus. We don't care much about Indus because Indus flows through some part of Kashmir and then goes into Pakistan anyway. Brahmaputra and Satluj are important to us. Brahmaputra flows for a longer length in Tibet called Yarlung Sangpo, but it brings a lot of benefits to people in Assam and then eventually moves to Bangladesh as Jamuna and then merges with Padma, which is the Ganga in Bangladesh, and they become Meghna and then they go to the sea, Bay of Bengal. Now, what is happening? China is building apparently the world's largest hydroelectric dam in Yarlung Tsangpo, which is Brahmaputra in their territory. Now, this dam is going to be 3 times or 4 times as big as the Three Gorges Dam, which is already the biggest in the world. So it is a massive dam. Now, it is less than 50 kilometers from the line of control. We don't have a border with China. We have only what's called the line of control, the line of actual control, right? Line of control is the Pakistan side. Line of actual control, LAC, is what we have with China because they do not recognize the McMahon line, which we have, which we recognize. But China doesn't recognize it. China considers Arunachal Pradesh to be a part of China, part of Tibet. They are building this very, very large dam. Now, after the 2017 standoff at Doklam, which is near Bhutan, China has stopped sharing all hydrological data. We don't really have an agreement with China on water, but we have some kind of protocol going, informal. We share data. At least China should share data because we are downstream. You see, we need to know how much it rained in Brahmaputra upstream so that we can be prepared for floods or for drought, whatever. Now, China used to be sharing this. Now, that data is not coming anymore. So, we have a problem that we don't have data on what to expect from Brahmaputra. Now, is it a water bomb? Some experts think yes, it is a water bomb. Some experts say that no, it is not a water bomb. The reason for saying that it is not a water bomb is that, see, this is the river. This is like a question mark. This Brahmaputra is actually like a question mark. It goes to east. It's a fascinating story of how this bend was discovered. Absolutely fascinating story. And then it takes a turn here, almost a U-turn, and then comes into India, flows through India, and then at some point enters Bangladesh and then goes to the sea. So this is like a big kind of a question mark or a sickle, you can say. Now, this part is longer than you can see, the part in India. Now, the amount of water that is collected in the Tibet part before it enters India is 85 billion cubic meters per year. In India, a lot of tributaries join Brahmaputra and add to the volume, and it becomes 526. So it is much larger. It is something like how much? 6, 7 times, something like that. 6 times at least. 6 times larger than. Yeah, but still it is considerable. You see, 85 is not a small number. So if they block water in a dam and release it strategically at one point of time to flood Assam, they can do that. So flooding counts. You don't need 500 billion cubic meters to flood Assam. Maybe 85 or 200 is enough, and that they can actually store and they can release water whenever they want. They need not inform us. So that is a water bomb. In case there is a conflict, how this dam will help China, we do not know. We don't have a conflict yet. But what we have is that they don't share data with us on what they are doing. So that is one part. The second part is that this is not in the map, but I can sort of expect you to imagine. China, this entire part of China above us is Tibet, which is mostly a barren land. There are very few people compared to the size of Tibet, which is probably 1/3 of India. There are very, very few people. Now, from Tibetan border to New Delhi, for example, is about 300 kilometers at the shortest point, somewhere in Uttarakhand or somewhere, to New Delhi would be a distance of 300 kilometers. Whereas for us, for a missile from India to reach China, is you have to cross this entire Tibet plateau. That is about 4,000, 5,000 kilometers. So if there were, I mean, just hypothetically, if there were to be a war between India and China, and if it is say a missile war, you launch a missile from in some place in India, say somewhere near the border, it will take a much, much longer time to reach any significant population of China, because the rest is all barren. China's population is mostly on the eastern part of China, along the coast, Hong Kong and Shanghai, Beijing, and rest of it. Not much, definitely not.
Sir,
Yeah, somebody has a question?
Sir, since you have mentioned that the part of China which is close to India is mostly barren, then why is this such a valuable resource for it, and why isn't it instead used by other countries? Since this is not even populated, there are more soldiers than there are people in this. Then why isn't it used for other countries? Why don't they try to take advantage of this and exploit all the advantages to them?
Who should take the advantage? I mean, it is a part of China, so they won't allow anybody to enter. So why?
Neighboring
Who should?
countries,
Pardon?
neighboring countries.
No neighboring country can fight China. China is a giant. China is not a small minion. So nobody, I mean, the last time Tibet saw an invasion was in the 1800s when they sent an expedition and captured Lhasa, etc. But that was when Tibet was more an autonomous region. But after that, once China has occupied it, then Tibet is Chinese territory. They are using it for many other purposes. They are using it for example, this dam on Yarlung Tsangpo will be the largest hydroelectric dam in the world, and the electricity will be taken to mainland China, the cities of China on the eastern coast. So they will have ways to manage all that. So it looks barren in terms of number of people, but that doesn't mean the strategic importance is less. And it has the headwaters of three big rivers. Not for us, it also has the headwaters of Mekong, which flows through Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, Vietnam, Laos, 5 countries. So it has the headwaters of many other countries. Mekong originates in China. If I'm not wrong, Irrawaddy also originates in China. So that is strategically in Tibet. So that is a very important region for China in terms of strategy. It may not have people at all. Doesn't matter. So I'm pointing out a simple geographical kind of an issue where you may have great missiles, but for you to reach a Chinese town will take 10 times longer than for China to have a base near the Indian border and hit any Indian city. Do you get it? Shall we move on?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, Sriram. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you see, Indus also originates in China. Sutlej also originates in China. Now we have come to something called Indus Water Treaty. Now this is between India and Pakistan. Now it was agreed that these three top rivers, this is Indus, which flows through India and then moves into Pakistan. This is Jhelum and this is Chenab. These three rivers are called the Western rivers. There are three rivers here, the Ravi, Sutlej, and Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej. These three rivers are the Eastern rivers. Now, a very sort of painstakingly negotiated agreement between India and Pakistan was the Indus Water Treaty. It took many years, nearly a decade or so, to arrive at some kind of a compromise on who will get what waters. The Western rivers, the three top rivers, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, went to Pakistan. Complete control on these waters. Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej, we have the control. Now, what does that mean? That means India gets just about 20% of the water. Pakistan gets 80% because Pakistan's entire agriculture is Punjab. There is nothing else in Punjab. I mean, there is nothing else in Pakistan except in Punjab. And that derives all its waters from the Indus basin. limited consumption. You can consume only limit. You cannot dig canals and use it for your agriculture in a very unlimited way. You have to limit it. There are stipulations. Unlimited non-consumption. We have got Bagranangal Dam on Sutlej. That is non-consumption means you get the water, you run some huge motors and turbines and produce electricity. The water is let out. Water is not stored. Water is not taken off the river to canals. So that was Sutlej. And we have right over 3 rivers in non-consumptive way and limited consumption. But this Indus Water Treaty held good even during the 1965 war, even during the 1971 war, and even during the Kargil conflict. All these wars happened, but the Indus Water Treaty was not taken off, was not like abrogated, or was not, we didn't put it on hold or something. We continued to stick to the Indus Water Treaty terms. It was a World Bank negotiated treaty, and we had a dispute redressal mechanism. If Pakistan complains that, hey, this is what you guys are not doing this, then there is a particular mechanism by which that complaint would be addressed. Queries would be taken care of by the commission. Then there were technical experts who were neutral, who had the teams from both India and Pakistan would inspect the sites. All of them were open to inspection. So it was a fantastic treaty, actually an example for the world to follow. Now, last year, around 1 year ago, April 2025, the Pahalgam terrorist attack happened, and the India decided that enough is enough. We are not going to stick to the treaty anymore, and treaty is in abeyance. We didn't sign off totally, but we said that we have put the treaty on hold. We are not sticking to the terms of the treaty. This is the first time we are doing it in 60, 70 years. A treaty which withstood all the wars that happened between the two hostile neighbors has now been put in abeyance because of that attack on Pahalgam. Now, it is not for us to judge whether that is the right move, but what it means is that Pakistan now says it is an act of war. You are taking away the waters which belong to us. We are telling them that, hey, now we will build a canal, we will build a dam on Chenab, we will build a dam on Jhelum. We will not stick to the terms of the treaty. So these are all, at the moment, they are all at stage of threats, nothing more. But this can be very easily escalated. So that you should now play just a small short intro. The water wars, as we call it, are not exactly confined to Indian subcontinent or Asia. They happen everywhere. Wherever there is a water sharing arrangement between two nations, even if they are not neighbors, it happens. Now, Siddharth will share a very short video. I'll stop share, Siddharth.
Yeah. While I'm switching, if Krishana had a question, go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, how do you measure a water treaty? Like, for example, if I say that I'll get 80% and you'll get 20% if we're different countries, how do you measure that one country actually takes 80% of the water and the other country takes 20%? Because the water keeps flowing, right? So how do you measure?
Correct. I mean, I don't know. I don't know either. But there must be a way. There must be a way which is technologically approved by experts by which you measure the water. For example, how do you measure rainfall in a particular location or across the country or across a state? There must be methods to approximate that, okay, now we got so much rainfall. Similarly, there must be methods to measure how much water is being consumed by India and how much water is being consumed by Pakistan. I do not know exactly the details, but something exists across the world. It is possible to measure that.
But why are water treaties even needed then? Don't rivers just keep flowing? Like, I understand if it's a lake or a water body that doesn't keep flowing, that...
Yeah, but the question is, how much water will you take? Supposing you take up all the upstream countries, if you have the head of the water at your disposal in your country, then you have the benefit of using as much as you want, and you can let out only whatever remains to the other country or other state or whatever. So that becomes the dispute, because they may actually need it. For example, Pakistan needs Indus waters more than we do. We have Ganga, we have Yamuna, we have so many other rivers across the country. We are much bigger. But Pakistan depends on Indus Basin completely for all their waters. There is no other river in Pakistan. Everything comes from the Indus rivers, the Indus river system. So if we say that we don't care much for the treaty and we are going to block it, they will be in big trouble. They won't like it at all.
So I'll go ahead and share screen to the video that Sriram wanted to share. This is just 5 minutes.
This is the Blue Nile and the dam that Ethiopia has built across it. It has the potential to give millions of people electricity, to transform the country, and the reservoir is starting to fill. Downstream, Egypt, a country built around the Nile, is furious and worried. So why can't Ethiopia and Egypt agree on the Nile Dam? This standoff is about water, history and politics. It's about who sets the rules, and it's about how these nations can be. Egypt's President Sisi says the Nile is a question of life, a matter of existence to Egypt, to which this is the reply.
Needless to say, the Nile is as important to Ethiopia as it is to Egypt and the Sudan as a source of livelihood and economic development.
No one doubts the wealth in the water, it's how you divvy it up. Let's begin with the country building this dam, Ethiopia. Work began in 2011, these pictures are from 2018. For Ethiopians, this is personal. They help pay for the dam through donations and loans, and the goal is to give electricity to more than 65 million of them who don't have it. Theirs is a grand ambition.
In the words of its late project manager, to eradicate our common enemy, poverty.
But can that be done without creating poverty elsewhere? The dam is on the Blue Nile, where most of the Nile's water comes from. It joins the White Nile in Sudan, and from there flows north to the Nile in Egypt, a country whose history and whose present intertwine with the river. The vast majority of its people live close to it, and from farmers to the foreign minister, Egyptians argue if the river changes, everything changes.
There is no Egypt without water. We either have water or there is no future for us. Decreasing our water share will kill us slowly.
A colossal project that Ethiopia has constructed across the Blue Nile could endanger the security and very survival of an entire nation.
Now, Egypt has long had things its own way with the Nile. In 1929, Britain recognised Egypt's historical rights to the river and gave it the power to veto any future construction upstream. That deal was then reinforced in 1959, favouring Egypt and Sudan. Neither of these agreements made any allowance for Ethiopia. Perhaps not unreasonably, that still rankles.
The 1959 agreement between Egypt and the Sudan has apportioned the entire waters of the Nile between the two of them, with Egypt securing the lion's share, leaving nothing for Ethiopia.
But Egypt argues that historical agreement is still valid. Ethiopia's blunt on this, calling these claims the most absurd thing you ever heard, all of which helps to explain what The Economist describes as the toxic mood in both countries. It says Egyptians have cast Ethiopia as a thief bent on drying up their country. In Ethiopia, Egypt's portrayed as a neo-colonial power trampling on national sovereignty, none of which sounds promising. So we're left asking, who can resolve this? The Trump administration, the UN and the African Union have all tried to mediate, but there's still no deal. And Ethiopia's not waiting for one. Here's the evidence. This satellite image is from the end of June. Note the water to the right of the dam. Then this is mid-July. Ethiopia's confirmed the reservoir is filling up. Now, the key stumbling block to a deal is that Ethiopia is reluctant to put a figure on how much water it will release. Egypt, though, wants a guaranteed amount, even during droughts. Sudan also wants guarantees. It says signing an agreement is a prerequisite for us before filling the dam. Sudan has the right to demand it. Maybe, but Ethiopia knows it holds plenty of cards. The "It's my dam" slogan taunts Egypt and suggests Ethiopia is rather enjoying the shift in the power dynamic. Certainly Ethiopians are. Clips like this have been uploaded to TikTok. You can see cups here representing Ethiopia, Sudan and South Sudan. They're filled with water. Then Egypt's share is poured out and the glass wiped clean. This leaves Ethiopians with a decision. whether to compromise. The dam is theirs, but the river isn't. Egypt told the UN Security Council recently, no nation is an island nation. And surely Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed recognises that. He helped end Ethiopia's lengthy conflict with Eritrea by compromising. His political approach is often described by the Amharic term medema, which means coming together, rejecting dogma and promoting compromise. As the dam continues to fill, his commitment to that idea is being tested. If you like that report, there are lots more from me and the team.
Back to you, Sriram.
Yeah.
Just there's been a question about what neocolonial means.
Okay. Colonialism, well, I mean, short answer is that colonialism is supposed to have ended. Essentially, Europeans occupying much of Asia and Africa is supposed to have ended in the 60s and little bit of early 70s. But it is generally seen to be coming back, not just by Europe, but by the US in a very surreptitious, in a very stealthy way. That is neocolonialism in a very, very short way. But we can discuss it later. Let's move on with this. Yeah. Okay. Now you just saw this. All right. Now, so we saw a lot about this hydropolitics, as we call it, the water politics. One thing which I forgot to mention in China building a dam is the seismic effect. So China doesn't have too many people in Tibet. So if there is an earthquake because of the dam, which may happen, experts warn us, nothing much can happen in Tibet. Not many people will die because there are very few of them. But there will be devastation in Assam and in Arunachal Pradesh and Bangladesh too. So that is another flashpoint, potential flashpoint for us. Now, what does Trump? Why does he want Greenland? He has been wanting Greenland. As soon as he came to power, he said that Greenland is ours. He went to Denmark and told them that, hey, give it to us. Greenland is very strange. Greenland is owned by a country which is 1/10 of its size, which is Denmark. Now, Greenland is some kind of an autonomous region, but it is controlled in a very, very loose way. It is controlled by Denmark. It's not exactly a colony. They have their own parliament, etc. But Trump wants Greenland to be a part of US. Why does he want it? Now, there is something called Northwest Passage, which is basically a shipping route via the Arctic Circle, which will cut 4,000 kilometers of travel between Europe and Asia compared to Panama Canal. Now, why is that so? See, this is the Arctic Ocean. You see, this is the Arctic Ocean. Now, if an European country wants to send, or if somebody from China wants to send some stuff to New York, right now you have to cross the Pacific Ocean. I'm not showing it in the map here. Cross Pacific Ocean, cross into Atlantic, and then come to New York. If this Arctic Circle is navigable, if you can send ships through this, Greenland is here. Now the ships can come through this, through the Bering Strait between Russia and America, and through this, and then traverse here and then reach New York. So it cuts a lot of distance, cuts a lot of fuel, cuts a lot of time. All of that is possible. So there is now why are we discussing this? Arctic strategically important. It has become important. Now the reason is that sorry for the spelling mistake here. Arctic temperatures are rising. So that means there is a global warming effect, which may actually see Arctic to be totally ice-free in summers in 2030s. As early as in 2030s, few years away from now, you would see Arctic Ocean being totally navigable, at least few months of the year, if not right through the year. Right through the year, it may take some time. But few months of the year, during summer months, the Arctic may not have any there will be ice, but it will be still ice-free in the sense that you can actually navigate a ship through Arctic waters. So now this is possibly the only positive effect of global warming I can think about. You can contest that. Now you can also go via South America. You can go via the South American continent and come to, from San Francisco to New York, you can go via the South American continent. But Cape Horn is a very difficult passage. It's not easy to go back. Now, the problem with the Arctic Ocean is that there are no ports, there are no facilities, there is nothing. Why are we even talking about Arctic ports? Because Panama is becoming a problematic one. Last year or 2 years ago, the lake which supplies water to the Panama Canal dried up totally. So Panama Canal receives a lot of water from a lake, and that lake dries up. No water in Panama Canal, ships cannot go through. In any case, ships are becoming larger than what Panama Canal can hold. So Panama has more or less reached a point of not being usable. So that is the problem with Panama Canal. And the extent of ice dropping in Arctic is 40% less compared to, say, 1979. So there is the real possibility of Arctic becoming navigable. Now, suddenly Canada, like this is like a landlord who suddenly realizes that, hey, actually the public thoroughfare goes through my property, has suddenly woken up to this claim that Inuits, who are part sort of subsect of Eskimos, have been there for 4,000 years, and that these Inuits are Canadians, and therefore it is our waters. So Canada in its maps has called this as internal waters of Canada. If you, basically this is a hafta collection practice, if you want to go through Arctic, because Arctic is all melting, it is sea now, not much ice, you can actually go through, but you will have to go through islands of Canada, the passages between the islands of Canada, and it is our internal water, so give us money. We will have a toll collection, toll booth, like we have in Indian roads now. So this is Canada's claim now. Why is it important for China? China is the world's largest trading nation. It is more than even US. So they have very strong ties with North America and Europe. On the passage, you will have a really good chunk of Chinese manufactured items will go through this Arctic route if it melts. And therefore, China has a tremendous kind of interest in the Arctic. So it has become a member of the Arctic Council, even though Arctic Council is meant for nations which are around the Arctic Circle. China, for some reason, has become a member of the Arctic as an observer. They are there. Now, why does Trump want Greenland? That is not, we have still not answered the question. Greenland is vital for two things. One is, of course, as a toll booth. Second is that from Greenland, you can watch the Russian missile pass very closely, from a very close kind of a distance. You can watch all kinds of other activities like submarines and etc. You can also keep a watch on the Chinese influence over the melting Arctic. You can collect toll from them. You can prevent them from using it for some purpose or the other. US already operates a base in Greenland, but they want complete control. They say that why is this tiny country called Denmark keeping Greenland? Let it be ours. What do you quote your price? He goes there with a blank check, says that you quote your price and let's take Greenland. And there is also the one more aspect, which is what is now coming into kind of prominence, called resource access, rare earth minerals, on which China has a very strong hold. So there are lots of rare earth minerals which are used in technology, in semiconductors, in computers, and in many other tech stuff. Now, much of this is in abundance in China. Other countries also have them, but then processing them actually leads to very sort of unpalatable or not so desirable consequences. So other countries are not processing it. China doesn't care. China processes it anyway. So China has a lot of rare earth minerals and they give it to the rest of the world. Now, US is now big rival for China. If they want access to resources beyond what China provides, Greenland is a great place. Okay. Now, Trump, one of this interesting statements he made was that if we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will. So it is some kind of a power competition, instead of a Cold War, now we have a tripartite kind of Cold War. In Trump's eyes, if we don't take Greenland, Russia and China will. Now that brings us to the current conflict in Strait of Hormuz. This is Iran. This is Oman. This is Oman. This is Strait of Hormuz. You might have read about Strait of Hormuz. Is there anyone here who has not read about Strait of Hormuz at all, who has not heard the name at all?
Well, everybody has heard.
Everybody has heard, right? It is on the news almost every day. There is not a day when you have a paper with we have any paper not mentioning Strait of Hormuz. Now, Strait of Hormuz on this side, this is a short map. You can't see much, but on this side this is UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc. And then go on to Saudi Arabia and then Kuwait and Iraq. On this side, it opens to the Arabian Sea and Pakistan and India. I think, yeah, this is the better. So you have UAE, you have Arabia, you have Kuwait. This is Gulf of Iran. It doesn't lead to anything. It leads to these two rivers here. That's all about it. It doesn't open out on that side to any other sea. Now, this is the Strait of Hormuz, choke point. And then you have Oman, you have Arabian Sea. So why is it important? It is important for a very simple reason. Nearly 20 to 30% of petrol for any country across the world, mainly for China and India, which comes from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Dubai, Iraq, Kuwait, and Iran, comes through this Strait of Hormuz. 20 to 30% of world's liquefied natural gas passes through Hormuz. Is there an alternative? There is no alternative. There are pipelines running through the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, but they are not much. They are not exactly alternatives. They are much smaller compared to what Hormuz carries in terms of ships. Even minor disruptions cause rapid spikes. Now, you might have actually heard about or you might have experienced issues with LNG gas. Now in India, if you book a gas cylinder, it will take another month for you to book the next cylinder. That is the government norm now. And cylinders are not available for new connections. You cannot go to a gas agency and book a new gas cylinder because we are so dependent on the LNG gas coming from the Strait of Hormuz route. So we don't have it. That has been choked. Iran has more or less stopped the supply from that area. So we are all in trouble. So if you are not getting your masala dosa in your favorite restaurant, and because the gas is in short supply and they want to conserve it by making only a few dishes and not masala dosa, now Strait of Hormuz is in the play. So it has actually impacted every one of us. I mean, all of us, our households and policymakers and just about anybody. I can't think of anyone unless one is living in as a tribe in tribal in Andaman that Hormuz has not touched. So it is that kind of an impact. Okay. Data cables. Many of the internet cables, major internet networks run through the waters of Strait of Hormuz for Google and for Meta, Facebook, and many other very large companies, data centers. The data cables run through Strait of Hormuz. Again, Iran is waking up to the possibility that, hey, your lines are going through our house. This is again a hafta collection approach, which has suddenly been realized. What is Iran's approach now? Now, we hear, if you open a paper today or any day for that matter, you will hear conflicting reports. US, for that basically Trump, will say that we are very close to signing the agreement. And you will hear an Iranian version saying that we are not any close at all. But on the other hand, if you hear the Iranian saying that, yeah, we are very close to the agreement, Trump will say that, no, we are not close to any agreement, we are going to bomb them. So every day we hear this strange news that Strait of Hormuz is being closed. Now, my question was that when was it open? It was not, it doesn't seem to be open at all. So what is this? Every day yesterday it was closed. So why are you announcing today that it is closed? So I really don't have a view on what is going on now. It's a very confused kind of picture because nobody seems to be, the truth is somewhere there. We don't know what exactly it is. That is the problem. Now, what is Iran's approach? Iran obviously doesn't match up to the US in terms of air power or for that matter any power, machine power or missile power or whatever power. But Iran doesn't need all of that. Iran needs some small drones Iran needs some low-cost missiles, launch pads to harass US and make it very expensive and risky for the US Navy to operate missiles and drones and planes for that matter. So you have a small drone built at a very low cost, possibly drowning or shooting down F-16 or some such very expensive fighter plane. Now, that is Iran's approach. Iran is harassing. Iran is operating at a very low cost kind of level, but it is very successful in that. You don't need a fight. You don't need air superiority. You don't need to completely overwhelm the American Air Force, but Iran has found a way to harass. Economic coercion we saw earlier. Nearly 20-30% of global oil passes through Strait of Hormuz. Even a temporary kind of a closure actually triggers a massive economic disruption. We are seeing it now. Every one of us, you, me, everyone in this room is experiencing some trouble because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz. Temporary or permanent or near permanent, whatever, that is a different question. Now, what is the advantage that Iran has realized? Iran has realized that they have lots of islands which serve as, they probably already built small missile bases in these islands. And Iran is not revealing all the cards now. We don't know what Iran is not going to tell us that this is what we are going to do tomorrow. We have no idea. Their leadership was totally brutally vanquished. And they have got a second level leadership now. Second level leadership goes for a toss, then third level leadership emerges. It seems to be unending kind of supply of leadership, supply of strategy, supply of tactics, supply of drones, seem to be low cost but unending. That is Iran's strategy. Now, we saw all this closures, harassment campaigns, tolls on shipping. Suddenly, Iran is now asking Oman, which is on the other side, that let us collect this hafta together on Strait of Hormuz. Even if the war comes to an end, Iran will not stop collecting the toll because it has now seen a very lucrative opportunity. You suddenly realize that it is actually going to be a lot of money for the country. Iran has been devastated in so many years of sanctions, etc. So money will be very useful. So let us collect the money. This is no different from some local dada collecting the money. I mean, I'm not blaming Iran particularly, but any country which is operating a toll at a choke point is behaving like a dada.
So, Sriram, just two clarifications.
Yeah.
Could you clarify what you mean by a choke point? And also, what do you mean by the strait opening or closing?
So the strait opening or closing. Now, for example, Iran monitors every ship. So there have been reports earlier. There were reports that Iran has attacked ships. Now, yesterday we saw the report that US has attacked a ship which had an Indian flag and 3 sailors were dead. Now, US is blaming Iran. We don't know who sort of launched the missile to hurt the ship. So basically, a choke point is where one country or one entity can control the movement of ships or people or planes or whatever it is. Any movement controlled by a nation, some nation, in international waters is a choke point. So does that answer your choke point question? What was your other question?
Yes, and the other question you already answered about how is the strait open or closed. So you can go ahead with moving to the Malacca Strait.
Akila has raised a hand. Akka, you tell me.
Sorry,
Akila.
I was thinking that if this seems like a game that's being played by both the nations. I think they want to keep it like that so that this kind of tension can continue throughout. And just last month, I was actually in Malaysia and I was looking at the Strait of Malacca and I was saying that this is the next Hormuz. I was wondering if that was a possibility. Okay.
I've also read views that Iran wants to keep it longer and several others want to keep it longer. Israel doesn't want to end the war at all. So Iran also wants to keep it longer. It means basically recouping a lot of money they had spent on many things or they had lost out in terms of opportunities in the last 10-15 years, and also to establish that we are the bosses here. This Strait of Hormuz is not a simple strait. It carries nearly 30% of the world's oil cargo. So I am the person, I decide who should go and who should not go. That is probably one reason why they have not uniformly mined it. So it is all of 21 miles at its shortest kind of width. So why don't they mine it totally and then not allow any ship? But Iran doesn't want to do that. Iran wants to allow the friendly ships to pass through, but the unfriendly nation ships will be halted. And at some point of time, they will start collecting money for anyone to pass through. I think even now they are doing that. So US doesn't want that. So US claims that they don't want it. So I don't know. It's a very bad war for US to get into, and they are now not finding a way to get out of it. So let's move to this place called Suez. Suez and Panama canals have been choke points in the past. 1956, Suez was nationalized. The Suez Canal Authority was nationalized by Egypt, and immediately Britain, France, and Israel, three nations, had a war on Egypt because the company that was controlling Suez Canal was a British-French company. So they said that our right is being taken away, so we will fight Egypt. US came in the picture, and US said that no, you will not fight, and the canal will belong to Egypt. So since then, US is being controlled by Egypt. Now Egypt can make it a choke point. Egypt can say nobody can go through Suez Canal unless you pay us some. I mean, anyway, there is a toll. But supposing they say that look, such nations ships cannot go through Suez, that will be a choke point. Panama Canal, again a toll collection booth for the US for many years, for decades, and then it was handed over to Panama, 1999 or sometime. It was handed over to Panama. Then it remains a toll collection booth for Panama. You pay a huge amount for a ship to pass through Panama Canal. So Malacca Strait is very interesting. Malacca Strait is this. It's very close to India. Now, more than the Strait of Hormuz, this is much bigger, much more lethal if it is closed compared to Strait of Hormuz. Almost all of China is somewhere here. Hong Kong is here. China is all here. Almost 60% of China's port traffic goes through Strait of Hormuz. Technology from the US or from Europe or from the Middle East, oil, all of that goes through this strait. Malaysia and Indonesia, at the shortest width, it is about 3 kilometers between Singapore and Sumatra. Now, Malaysia and Indonesia is this side, Sumatra. Malaysia is on the other side. They fought a war. They fought a war in 1960s, though they are not exactly great friends right through. They fought wars. Supposing they fight a war again, and taking a lesson from Hormuz, one of them closes the Strait of Malacca, you will have a big problem. Ships will have to go through then this entire archipelago. They will have to find a way out into the Pacific Sea again and, go back here. So it's a very, very tricky proposition. This is the easiest. You go here and then you are on to the South China Sea. But if this is choked, and it is easier to choke, it is just all of 3 kilometers. Strait of Hormuz is 21 kilometers. This is 21 miles, some 30 kilometers. This is 3 kilometers at its shortest width. So easier to choke. These two have fought a war. This carries more volume, more traffic, more trade than Strait of Hormuz. Potential choke point any day. Now, we will just come to more near the end. Conflicts in history which were decided by geography in the ancient times when passes were important. Now, passes are probably not important because you have drones and you have many other creatures. Mountain passes were important. You had some of you may have seen this movie called 300. Leonidas, who was the king of Sparta, which is a Greek city, held a 100,000 minimum kind of number of Persian soldiers at this place called Thermopylae. He was not armed very big. He had an army which was like nothing compared to the Persian army. But the pass was between a mountain and a sea, so he held it. And for 3 days, they just did not allow the Persians to pass through. That helped in the Greeks actually retreating very well and preventing their army from being destroyed. So that was what we call as a force multiplier. Leonidas was killed anyway, finally, because somebody betrayed, one of the Greek guys betrayed the Greeks. and the Persians and showed a path to Persians which went over the mountains. So Greeks were surrounded, the 300 people were surrounded, and they were annihilated. But then the Persians eventually lost the war. They didn't gain much. That was all because a single mountain pass was held on by just 300 people. It's the most famous kind of a choking point in the entire history of the world. You have climate becoming a factor in nations' defeats and victories. You have Napoleon's invasion of Russia. Napoleon was famously defeated by General Winter and not exactly by Russian forces. Russians did not have the energy or the army to fight Napoleon. They just followed a kind of a scorched earth policy. You just burn everything and move over. So Moscow was burnt, and they moved into the interiors of Siberia. Napoleon came to Moscow, found nothing, and he could not have the supply lines, because if you are moving a very large army, you need food, you need many other things, you need machines, you need to replace, you need doctors, you need all kinds of things. But that supply line was totally cut. It was a very long kind of distance from France, and Russia was very vast. Napoleon was finally defeated by the climate. Winter, he lost most of the soldiers to frostbite and such other things. Ditto happened. German invasion of USSR, Russia became Soviet Union. Second World War, Germans did not learn the lesson. They also got into Russia thinking that they will be in Moscow by summer and all will be well and Russia will surrender. That did not happen. Winter was particularly severe, and winter defeated the invading German forces. Russians were prepared. Russians knew what the winter was like, so they were always prepared for winter in terms of clothing and food. The Germans were not. The French with Napoleon were not. Island hopping by US in the Second World War. Again, Japanese had gone and occupied many, many islands up to Indonesia because they needed the oil of Indonesia to fight the war. So they had occupied many islands. They fortified the islands. They had planes, they had armies, they had guns, they had everything. Each island was a fortress. Now, they expected Americans to fight with them in every single fortress, and it will really escalate and it will totally exhaust the Americans. That was the plan. But that did not happen. Americans just bypassed lots of Japanese occupied islands, leaving them to just starve. They cut off the supply lines. So Japanese so-called fortresses, islands, were not getting food, were not getting planes, were not getting ships. The soldiers did not have anybody to fight with. They were just there with their guns. There was nobody to fight with because Americans bypassed them and were moving towards Japan. They had a single objective: to land in Japan. So this island hopping brilliantly worked during the Second World War. You had jungles and weather manipulation in Vietnam War. You had, I'm just giving you examples of how various other geographical elements played a role. We don't have much time to actually go through in detail, but just to give you an idea, very sort of broad idea of how any geographical element had been manipulated. Operation Popeye is a very interesting one. Americans seeded clouds in Vietnam so that the monsoon would be extended. So the paths would remain muddy and the North Vietnam soldiers would not be able to attack South Vietnam for a longer time. So, it was making the lives of North Vietnamese soldiers more difficult. To prolong the monsoon beyond the 3 or 4 months, which it is where it is naturally raining, you seed the clouds and the clouds rain. So everything becomes slushy and muddy. And there was actually a slogan like "Make mud, not war," some such thing during the Vietnam War. So they had Agent Orange is defoliating. Vietnam had very thick forests. So Americans came up with this chemical. They just sprayed them in millions of tons of barrels or whatever that is. And all the leaves fell off the tree. So you could spot enemy soldiers very clearly. So again, a geographical feature taken advantage of. And this now, towards the end, we will talk about how, against all odds, against the elements of geography, how people have surprisingly won. Not, just small wars, but very big ones. Hannibal, a general from Carthage in North Africa, fought Rome. Now, Rome had a very strong fleet. I don't have the maps to tell you here, but then if you can look up the maps, you can see that Italy is surrounded by Mediterranean, and Rome had a very strong control of that sea. So there was no point in sending an and Rome and Carthage were enemies, but Hannibal actually crossed into Europe through Spain and came over Alps. If you see the map, you will see that there is Alps between Italy and France and Spain, and he crossed Alps with elephants and surprised the Romans from the north. The Romans were expecting this guy to attack from the sea, and he is coming up from the north, and he attacked them, and actually he just devastated them in one big war. But that is a different story. Now, so geographical advantage, I don't think after Hannibal anyone has gone through Alps with an elephant. That is just not possible for normal human beings. Japan capturing Singapore. Singapore is at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, so they were open to seize on all the three sides, and they were looking forward to Japanese attacking them from the sea. So they had placed big cannons and were looking out for the Japanese ships. Japan did something interesting. Malaysian jungle, which was behind Singapore, was considered impenetrable, tropical jungle. Now, Japanese came by cycles. Japanese came by cycles through the Malaysian jungles and came behind Singapore and captured Singapore. That was the single most devastating British surrender in the history of Britain. Singapore surrendered with all the British troops. Japanese came by cycle. They did not even have tires on the cycles. They had the aluminum or the metal wheel, and the metal wheel made noises which Allied soldiers thought that tanks were coming. Actually, cycles were coming. And, that was a hilarious kind of a instance. But then they came by cycles through the jungles and captured Singapore. Absolutely out of the box thinking, but phenomenal success. Chinese army crossing the Himalayas into our India and occupying Arunachal in 1962, more than 64 years ago. Everybody thought that Himalayas were impenetrable and, formidable barrier for anyone to come in. India cannot be attacked from the north. The Chinese came through Himalayan passes and they occupied almost all of Arunachal, and then they left it also. They went back, but then they captured. They could have easily captured Assam. They could have captured even Calcutta. But something which was considered impenetrable, the Himalayan barrier, became penetrable, and the myth was broken. Britain taking Falklands. Falklands, if you see the map, I don't have the map here. Argentina is in South America, the tip of South America.
I can share the map if you want.
I think we are not, we don't have much time, so we will close that. Yeah. Falklands Islands, we can share the PPT so they can look at it.
Sure.
Falklands is 400 kilometers from Argentina. Argentina has always considered Falklands to be their own. And one day in 1982, they just came and occupied Falklands and said, from tomorrow, this is our territory. And Britain's, it's not Britain territory. British are 13,000 kilometers away. Britain is 13,000 kilometers away. Argentina is 400 kilometers away. It is somewhat like India trying to occupy an island in Hawaii. It is that kind of a distance. Now, Argentina occupied it. Britain said that no way. And the general justification was that there are more penguins in Falklands than people. There are probably 100 people in Falklands. Britain said nothing doing, it is our territory and we will take it back. They actually came with ships all right through. In 1982, they sailed, a whole armada sailed from Britain to Falklands and retook the territory, defeated Argentina, even though it was very close, and took back Falklands Islands, which is still British overseas territory. Ever since, Argentina and Britain have sort of re-established their diplomatic relationship, but Argentina still considers Falklands to be their own, and Britain says nothing doing. It is ours. Even the penguins are ours. Everything is ours. We will not give back. So that is a standoff. But the big point was that nobody expected Britain to do anything from 13,000 kilometers away against a country which is 400 kilometers away. They won the war. Now, interesting questions for you to think about is that can there be a Vienna Convention? Or there is a Vienna Convention on ozone layer. You can read about it, Montreal and Ozone Protocol. All the countries agreed to a regulatory framework on how much emission you can have, etc. And ozone layer is being brought under some control. Can we have such a convention in place for geographical features in conflicts. Is melting of Arctic is good for global economy because ships can sail through, cut off the distance, shorter distances, so you can save on fuel, on time, etc. Now, does it mean that global warming is to be welcomed? What happens? Are there negative effects of Arctic Ocean melting and becoming ice-free through summer and some point of time ice-free through all of the year? What can be done? Now that Indus Treaty, closer home between India and Pakistan, is in abeyance, we are not following it. Is there a way we can put it back? Is there a model which we can follow? Because it was a very successful treaty despite 3 wars. It is not that we and Pakistan were friends. We fought 3 wars, but right through the wars, the treaty held. What can we do to put it back on track? How can nations that share a river like Ethiopia and Egypt, you saw the video, how can they be made to strictly follow a protocol, a global protocol for sharing the waters if a river runs through 3 or 4 nations? And interestingly, Egypt and Ethiopia are not even neighbors. There is another country between them called Sudan, but they are fighting now. They are fighting in the sense they are not in armed conflict, but they have extremely divergent views on how the water of the Nile should be shared. Now, if Arctic becomes ice-free, what does that mean for Russia? What does that mean for NATO and the US and all the Western European countries? And as one person pointed out in that film, should tackling poverty in one country, say in Ethiopia, necessarily increase poverty in another country? Can this be done in any other way? How can Ethiopia get more electricity for its people? Because that seems to be the need. It is not a fake need. It is a real need. They need that dram. They need some power in order to give electricity to millions of people in their country. How can that happen without compromising the need for the water security for Egyptian farmers? So I'll end there now, and if you have questions, we still have, I think we are running out of time, but I am here.
We're at time, but we can continue the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to, I'll moderate the questions.
Please.
So there were a couple of people previously who had asked questions. So Krishana wanted to know about why would a country want to close a strait? So
because there is
in the case of, and I think maybe several people have been asking questions, I think a little more context on the case of the current Israel-US war on Iran. Why is Iran wanting to close the Strait of Hormuz?
They are not closing the strait for everyone. They are, first thing is that when they say we close the strait only for nations which are not with us, for our enemies or their friends. Iran will not close the strait for ships from China because China imports a lot of oil from Iran. And given a chance and choice, Iran will not close the strait for China because China is a friend and China pays to get Iranian oil. So closure of the strait is a very strategically used kind of a tool. You close it only for your enemies. You won't close it for others. It is like allowing certain people to come into your house and exit. You are not going to allow everybody. You are going to allow only your friends, right? So it's not closed for all. It's closed for some, not for others. You pay some, and for others again, you can pay and get away with it. So whether supposing you are a neutral country, you don't care much for Iran or US. Now I want my ships to pass through. What would I do? Iran will say, okay, now pay us so much per ship, and then you go. As long as you are not our enemy, you are fine, but then you have to pay us. So it is like a hafta collection booth. It's money, right? Every nation wants money.
Yeah. Thanks, Sriram. Viraj, your hand has been up for a while.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask that long ago in the World War II, America had made Japan surrender and completely abandon its military forces. when this happened, why did the Japanese completely reluctantly just agreed and not just take hold of their military force? And I'm not complaining because most of all of the Japanese citizens, almost all of them are happy because now they're one of the most civilized and modernized countries. But if they would have rejected that offer, then they would have still have one of the best armies as in they had before. Why did they completely reject this, accept the offer?
No, it was not an offer. It was a surrender. So the surrender terms were that they dropped 2 atom bombs, and they told Japan that if you don't agree, then we will drop more. And each atom bomb kills hundreds of thousands of people. So Japan was not just prepared for that. Japan was prepared for a hand-to-hand combat on the mainland, but Japan was not prepared for this kind of devastation. So they had no option but to agree to America to unconditional surrender. It was not a conditional surrender. It was an unconditional surrender. And it was not just America. By the time Japanese were considering this, Germany had been defeated, and you had China, which was emerging on one side as a threat. Soviet Union was also occupying islands of Japan. And then you have the US. It was not US alone to which Japan surrendered. It was allied kind of force. Japan would not be able to withstand the combined attack from China, Russia, and US and Britain, or whatever was left. So the decision was not a decision. It was they had no option but to just surrender unconditionally and accept the American terms. America ruled it for the next 5 years and then modified a lot of things and then went back.
Then Kabir, you had some questions. Also, I realize we're at time. So for those of you who have joined in today, thank you. Feel free to leave if you don't want to stay for the Q&A section. And I'll be in touch over email and WhatsApp about what our upcoming events are. Kabir?
Yes, so could I please share an example of how geography actually affected history?
Oh, I thought the whole presentation was about that.
No, I think Kabir wants to share one. You want to share one more example?
You want to share, is it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, when Ashoka was ruling India during the Mauryan Empire, basically Ashoka attacked a kingdom known as Kalinga because the land over there was very fertile. So, as well as a few other reasons. So that actually shows how physical features can actually affect history.
Yeah. Point taken.
Thanks, Kabir. Samhita, earlier you'd also asked this question of why is the UN doing nothing in all of this? Is that the question you're wanting to ask now?
That and another one, sir.
Go ahead.
So I did want to ask that, first of all, thank you so much, Siddharth sir and Sriram sir, for the wonderful session. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to ask that why is Israel wanting the war to go on? Because wasn't it in conflict with Palestine just a few years back, and wasn't it a very gruesome war? Why do they want to sully their reputation more? Why do they want to lose so much more money by going into this war with Iran along with US?
Well, I mean, anybody's guess. We have a very particularly strange leader in Israel called Netanyahu. So what goes on in his mind, nobody knows. But why is Israel wanting to go on? If I were to take the question as why does Netanyahu want to go on with the war? That is more likely the case because there are a lot of Israelis who are against the war and who write about the war and who say that this is not on. Is that it wants to, in some sense, subdue Iran for a very long time. Secondly, they want to totally make sure that Iran will not produce an atomic bomb, so a nuclear bomb. So that is something that Israel is very keen on. So they want to make sure that Iran, not just on paper, agrees, but Iran actually loses all the capability to make a nuclear weapon. That is Israel's object. That is the only nation in that ambit, Israel's ambit, which will have which has now a potential to produce a nuclear weapon. And Iran considers Israel to be an enemy. So Israel thinks that it cannot afford its enemy to have a nuclear weapon. So that is one big reason. But basically, make sure that Iran is totally subdued, so subdued that they will say sign on the dotted line on whatever agreement is given to them and will not raise their voice for the next 10, 15 years or so. So that's why they want the war to go on. That is my guess. I have no idea what Netanyahu wants.
And sir, regarding my question about the UN, because in the past we have seen like this coalition of nations fail in their objective. For example, the League of Nations after World War One, we have seen something like that fail. So how is UN doing anything better than the League of Nations did back then? Because it is quite literally not had any say in this.
One point is that UN has withstood for longer time than League of Nations. League of Nations died a very quick death. But UN has withstood for nearly 7, 8 decades now. So being there itself, existing itself is a sign of success. That is number one. Number two is that there have been conflicts where UN had mediated reasonably well. For example, this Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan was negotiated by World Bank, which is a creature of part of UN, arm of UN, and it was very successfully negotiated. It held on for many years. For the last 70 years, that was holding good. And now it is not there, but then it is still in abeyance. It has not been sort of taken out of the paper totally. It is still there. We can go back to it. So there have been successful kind of stopping war kind of activities, small skirmishes. There have been UN machines in places like Congo where they have been reasonably successful in sort of at least containing the conflicts. So all that has happened. Where they have not been able to do much, where big powers are involved, and big powers really don't care for UN or for the matter anybody. So they have not been able to do much in a conflict where there is Russia on one side or China on one side and the US is on the other side. They have not been able to negotiate much. And now that level is being brought down. They are not able to do much even in terms of Iran or US, because one is that US has lost its kind of respect or regard for UN and is mostly withdrawn from the UN in terms of money. Now, which country provides a lot of money to UN? Where is UN headquartered? New York. Which country sustains UN in terms of monetary facilities and support? US. US has totally brought down its spending on UN. I don't know whether they spend any money at all now. So there is a problem there. We don't know what UN has in terms of future possibilities, but there are reasons to say that UN was far more successful than League of Nations, beginning with the longevity of the organization. UN is still around. League of Nations just died. That's all.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amita. Finally, Krishiv.
Sir, I wanted to ask that in the dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt, so if Ethiopia really wants that electricity that much, then why can't they produce the electricity from the water and then let it go to Egypt so Egypt also can have some share of it for their people?
That is what they are claiming that they are doing. And hydroelectric dams are not consumed. They don't take water away. Hydroelectric dams actually use the water to produce electricity and release the water back in the river. That is the general notion that we have. Why is Egypt objecting to it is probably because there will be a dam and that dam will prevent the flow of water. Eventually, the water will flow. But when it will flow, now, when is also a question for the Egyptian farmer. Supposing you are expecting water in the month of June, but Ethiopia has blocked the water to produce electricity, and the water is going to be let out only in October. Now, what will the Egyptian farmer do if he depends on water from June to October? What will you do? You won't have anything. You don't have the control on that, right? So eventually Egypt will get the water, but then Ethiopia will have the leverage, will have the control on when to release that water, because it is used for non-consumptive purpose. It is used for hydroelectricity. It is not going to take the water away. It will release the water back. Question is, if there is it's going to be a big dam. So if the dam is big, and if the rain, supposing the rainfall is not much, the dam will not fill easily. So Ethiopia may take its own time to produce electricity or sufficient electricity and say that, okay, now we will release the water when we want and when we are all right with it. We are satisfied. That is not acceptable to Egypt. So that is a problem.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So, yeah. Thanks, Sriram. And just speaking to this last question, I think one thing we've seen throughout all the examples that you've shared is that control is something that's very important for nations.
Right.
And all of these different ways in which geography, in which climate change has shaped the capacity of different nations to have control over the basic resources that they depend on.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, the current war around the Strait of Hormuz has showed to nations that there is this new lever.
Yeah.
Of control that they have, that even if, like suppose Iran and Israel were just fighting it out by themselves and it didn't affect the rest of the world wouldn't really bother.
Yeah.
But because there is this geographical this geographical coincidence or the nature of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has realized that it can fight this asymmetric war because Israel and the US have far more military power than Iran does.
Yeah, but that is not enough.
By using the asymmetry of the Strait of Hormuz, that geography to spread the pain elsewhere.
Yeah, so which is what Iran is doing very successfully. So that is something that they seem to have realized in this war. Had it not happened, it was not a well thought out kind of a plan. I mean, they probably did not imagine that they have this lever. Suddenly you realize that you have a pot of gold in your house. This is it. Let us use it now. So they are not revealing all their cards. We don't know what they will do next, but they seem to be something up the sleeve. We don't know. Yeah. But it's also another point that all your large navies and armies and ships. See, one thing is that there was a time when nuclear missiles had to be launched from sites on land. Now, Navy has become more powerful. You get missiles launched from navies, right? You have aircraft carriers and all, which launch missiles. They can even launch a nuclear missile. So you don't really need a launch site on the land. But even that is not enough. Now, you have an armada in the Arabian Sea, Americans, but that doesn't seem to be enough to totally subdue Iran. Iran finds ways to irritate them, to sort of give them big pain, because Americans have invested. So one big fighter plane lost for Americans means millions of dollars lost, and a few more millions add up. Then Trump will have to seek the permission of Congress for spending more on defense. Iran doesn't have all that. Iran will send one small drone to do something. See, so small low-cost techniques to counter big investment, drowning infrastructure and defense technologies. So we are seeing a very, very different kind of a war and conflict scenario in the world. So there is not much. So there is no point in claiming that you have the largest army in the world. Doesn't mean anything. Look at what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. Everyone thought that Ukraine will be just pulverized in the matter of months or maybe a year. Ukraine is still fighting, and they are actually bombing Moscow or St. Petersburg or somewhere. So they are sending drones. Their technology is superb. So they are holding on. Not that they are winning the war, but they are holding on. There seemed to be some kind of an impasse which nobody thought was coming.
So Sriram, Kundan, who is actually joining us from Panama, is asking whether Panama Canal is a choke point because it respects neutrality. Ships of any flag can pass through just by paying the toll. So why do you consider the Panama Canal as a choke point?
For the reason that, for example, Hyundai or some company from China had taken had one part of it, the Pacific side or the Atlantic side. There was some facility which was taken over by the Chinese firm. US objects to that. US says that no, you can't have, because in case of a conflict between US and China, now who will this company, which is a Chinese company, may say that we will permit only ships allowed by China, not inimical ships, and it will be so close to the US kind of US landmass, right? It will be part of it will be a US. I mean, it will be in the Americas. So America doesn't want any Chinese influence on its backyard. So because all said and done, Panama Canal, if some entity can stop ships to go through, it is done. It's a choke point, because you have to take a 13,000 or 14,000 kilometer route via the South American tip to reach the other side. That is just not possible for many ships or many countries. I mean, it won't just work. So Panama Canal is a potential choke point for whoever controls it. That is one reason why US had been controlling it for decades, since 1914 till 1999. US would not give up the power. And in fact, at some point of time, when this Manuel Noriega, whoever that guy was the dictator of Panama, US ousted him. US came in, ousted him, and took over the Panama and installed somebody there. So it is a potential choke point. It has not become a choke point yet, but Chinese interests are being very carefully monitored, watched by Americans with a lot of apprehension. I think, if I'm not wrong, I think that Chinese company was made to pack up and go, and Panama was told that you will not give contract to Chinese companies on either side. Something like that happened. I'm not very sure of the details, but that is because it is a joke.
Great. Thank you so much, Sriram. This was a lovely discussion as always. And thank you to all who have stayed 20 minutes past time for the Q&A.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And we will see you all in the future in other events.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, sirs. Thank you, sirs.
Bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for the question, Kundan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.